Welcome, my fellow attorneys, to the National Bankruptcy Academy video series. I'm your host, Robert Schaller, an attorney with over 34 years of experience and a registered certified public accountant. Today, we'll be discussing Bankruptcy Schedule E/F, creditors who have unsecured claims, with a line-by-line analysis with real-world commentary. I hope you enjoy the video. A debtor's schedule of unsecured creditors is officially titled Official Form 106 E/F. Schedule E/F creditors who have unsecured claims. The form is commonly referred to as simply Schedule E/F. Every Chapter 7 debtor must file a schedule of liabilities that include both secured and unsecured creditors. This course focuses on the listing of unsecured creditors, and other courses discuss listing secured creditors. The creditors listed in Schedule E/F are limited to those creditors whose debts are not secured by a lien or other security interest against the property owned by the debtor. Unsecured creditors are sub-categorized as owning either priority claims or non-priority claims. Priority claims refer to the order in which unsecured claims are paid from distributions made by the Chapter 7 panel trustee. Priority claims are paid by the trustee in full prior to any non-priority claims being paid. Examples of priority claims include domestic support obligations, including alimony and child support, and some income tax liabilities. Examples of non-priority claims include credit card debt and medical bills. The people or organizations to whom the debtor owes money are called creditors. A claim is a creditor's right to payment. When the debtor files for bankruptcy, the court needs to know who all the creditors are and what type of claims they have against the debtor. Now note the emphasis on all creditors. All creditors must be listed, or the debt owed to any unlisted creditor may not be discharged in bankruptcy. Typically, in bankruptcy cases, there are more debts than assets to pay those debts. The court must know as much as possible about the creditors to make sure that their claims are properly treated according to the bankruptcy rules. Schedule E/F identifies everyone who has an unsecured claim against the debtor when the debtor files the bankruptcy petition. Creditors may have different types of claims. Secured claims, these claims are discussed in another course and are listed on Schedule D, creditors who have claims secured by property, Official Form 106D. Unsecured claims, these claims are the focus of this course and are listed on Schedule E/F. If the debts are not paid, creditors with secured claims may be able to get paid from specific property in which that creditor has an interest, such as a mortgage or a lien. That property is sometimes called collateral for the debt and could include items such as the debtor's house, car, or furniture. Creditors with unsecured claims do not have rights against specific property of the debtor. Many creditors' claims have a specific amount which the debtor does not dispute. However, some claims are uncertain when the debtor files for bankruptcy, or they become due only after the debtor filed. The debtor must list the claims of all creditors in the schedules, even the claims that are contingent, unliquidated, or disputed. These terms can be confusing, so let's discuss them. Contingent claims first. A claim is contingent if the debtor is not obligated to pay it unless a particular event occurs after the debtor files for bankruptcy. For example, if the debtor co-signs someone else's note, the debtor may not have to pay unless that person later fails to repay the loan. Now, unliquidated claims are different than contingent claims. A claim is unliquidated if the amount of the debt cannot be readily determined, such as by referring to an agreement or by a simple computation. An unliquidated claim is one for which there may be a definite liability, but where the value has not been set. For example, if the debtor has involved in a car accident, the victim may have an unliquidated claim against the debtor because the amount of damages has not yet been set. Now let's discuss disputed claims. A claim is disputed if the debtor disagrees about whether the debtor owes the debt or disputes the amount of the debt. For example, if a bill collector demands payment for a bill the debtor believes was already fully paid, the debtor may describe the claim as disputed. A single claim can have one, more than one, or none of these characteristics. Creditors with unsecured claims do not have liens on or other security interest in the debtor's property. Secured creditors have a right to take property if the debtor does not pay them. Common examples of secured creditors are lenders for the debtor's home, car, or furniture. Do not leave out any unsecured creditors. List all the unsecured creditors in each part of the form in alphabetical order as much as possible. Even if the debtor plans to pay a creditor, the debtor must list that creditor. When listing creditors who have unsecured claims, be sure to include all of them. For instance, include the following: the debtor's relatives or friends to whom the debtor owes money, the debtor's ex-spouse if the debtor is still obligated under a divorce decree or settlement, a credit card company even if the debtor intends to fully pay the credit card bill, a lender even if the loan is co-signed, anyone who has a loan or promissory note that the debtor co-signed for someone else, anyone who has sued or may sue the debtor because of an accident, dispute, or similar event that has occurred, or anyone who is trying to collect a debt from the debtor, such as a bill collector or attorney. Now let's focus our attention on the priority aspect of an unsecured claim. Unsecured claims could be either priority or non-priority, but what are priority secured claims? In bankruptcy cases, priority unsecured claims are those debts that the bankruptcy code requires to be paid in full before other unsecured claims are paid. The most common priority unsecured claims are certain income tax debts and past due alimony or child support. Now let's focus some examples on priority unsecured claims. Here's a list of some priority claims. Domestic support obligation: if the debtor owes domestic support to a spouse or former spouse, a child, the parent, legal guardian, or responsible relative of a child or governmental unit to whom such a domestic support claim has been assigned. Next, taxes and certain other debts the debtor owes the government. If the debtor owes certain federal, state, or local government taxes, customs duties, or penalties. Next, claims for death or personal injury that the debtor caused while the debtor was intoxicated. If a creditor has a claim against the debtor for death or personal injury that resulted from unlawful operating a motor vehicle or vessel while the debtor was unlawfully intoxicated from alcohol, drugs, or another substance. This priority does not apply to claims for property damage. The next question: what are non-priority unsecured claims? Well, non-priority unsecured claims are those debts that generally will be paid after priority unsecured claims are paid. The most common examples of non-priority unsecured claims are credit card bills, medical bills, and educational loans. Another question to consider: what if a single claim is both priority and non-priority amounts? If a single claim is both priority and non-priority amounts, list that claim in Part 2 of Schedule E/F and show both priority and non-priority amounts. Do not list it again in Part 3. In Part 3, list all the other unsecured creditors the debtor has not yet listed. As stated before, the debtor must list every creditor the debtor owes, regardless of the amount the debtor owes, and even if the debtor plans to pay a particular debt. If the debtor does not list a debt, it may not be discharged in bankruptcy. Now let's turn our attention to the bankruptcy form with a line-by-line analysis with real-world commentary. I hope you enjoy the video. Now let's shift our focus on completing Schedule E/F. At the top of the form is the familiar box. Fill in this information to identify your case. So let's start filling it in. Debtor 1, that'd be George Washington. And debtor 2, his spouse, Martha Washington. And the United States Bankruptcy Court, we're going to be filing the schedule in, is going to be the Eastern District of Virginia. So go to the pull-down menu. Scroll down till you find the Eastern District of Virginia, and there it is. So we'll click on that. The next is the case number, if known. Well, in our example of George and Martha Washington, this Schedule E/F will be filed at the same time the petition is filed. Therefore, the case number box will be left blank because the case number is not assigned until the petition is filed with the clerk of the bankruptcy court. Once the petition is filed, a case number is issued, and then all future documents have to have that case number on it. But since it's being filed simultaneously with the petition, there will not be any case number. Over here to the far right is a box to check if it's an amended filing. If this was an amended Schedule E or F, we click the box. And why would you amend the Schedule E and F? You'd file an amended Schedule E and F most typically when a creditor was accidentally omitted from the schedule. So upon filing an amended one, you'd also have a case number. because by definition, if it's an amended schedule, it means the petition has already been filed, and therefore the clerk of the court would have already issued a case number. So here's an example. But again, in this particular example of George and Martha Washington, the schedule is filed with the petition, so there will not be a case number, so I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to uncheck the box to the right that says check if this is an amended filing. Okay, so next, let's go down the form. It says Official Form 106E/F. Schedule E/F is creditors who have unsecured claims. So now let's read the instructions. Be as complete and accurate as possible. Use Part 1 for creditors with priority claims. And we already talked about that earlier, what a priority claim is. And Part 2 for creditors with non-priority claims. And again, we distinguished between priority and non-priority earlier in this course. List the other party to any executory contracts or unexpired leases that could result in a claim. Also list executory contracts on Schedule A/B property. And on Schedule G, executory contracts and unexpired leases. Do not include any creditors with partial secured claims that are listed in Schedule D. Otherwise, they'll be double counting, so keep them separate. If more space is needed, copy the part you need, fill it out, number the entries in the box on the left, and attach the continuation page to this page. Okay, so let's scroll down now to Part 1. All right, Part 1 is titled List All of Your Priority Unsecured Claims. So again, can constantly distinguish between priority and non-priority. So this Part 1 is just the priority unsecured claims. Question number 1 says, do any creditors have priority unsecured claims against you? Well, if the debtor doesn't, it's pretty easy. Just check the box no, and then move on to Part 2. But in this example of George and Martha Washington, they do have priority claims. So I'm going to uncheck the box no, and instead check the box yes. Moving down to line 2 of Part 1 is titled List All Your Priority Unsecured Claims. If a creditor has more than one priority unsecured claim, list the creditor separately for each claim. For example, if you owe the IRS taxes for 2 separate tax years, those would be separate bills, list them separately. Identify what type of claim it is. If a claim has both priority and non-priority amounts, list that claim here and show both priority and non-priority amounts. As much as possible, list the claims in alphabetical order for everyone's convenience. If you have more than 2 priority unsecured claims, fill out a continuation sheet. All right, so let's use some examples. I'm going to scroll down to get 2.1 on the screen. There it is. Notice the box over here, 2.1. And that's for the convenience of everybody to try to identify which creditor you're talking about. And the 2.1 really means line 2 of Part 1. And 2.1 is the first creditor with priority claims. And 2.2 would be the second creditor with priority claims. So let's fill in 2.1. And in this case, who is the priority creditor? We're saying it is Cindy Washington Jefferson. And that would be a former spouse of George Washington. And George owes alimony, and child support, and a property settlement to Cindy. So let's list it. Priority creditor, Cindy Washington Jefferson. And then list the address. Okay, the next then we have to go down, say who incurred the debt. So who incurred the debt would be who is the actual debtor that owes the debt to Cindy Washington Jefferson. In this case, it's George Washington because it's alimony and child support from a former marriage. So we're going to check debtor 1 only, meaning George Washington. Down on below it on the first column, it says, is the claim subject to a set-off or an offset? And the answer would be no. An offset in general means while the debtor owes money to the creditor also owes money to the debtor. And you can sort of subtract the amount that is owed by the creditor to the debtor. So for example,